let's not do that. So data-driven dashboards with Kibana and Elasticsearch. And I'm not sure where everybody stands with Elasticsearch since we have 2 talks and I don't want to spend too much time here. Yeah, I'm part of the community team, but that's as much as you need to know about me. You will find me at meetups and conferences every now and then. What you probably know is the good old ELK stack, which we often portrayed something like this, and then we added beats from the lightweight agent or shipper. Problem was we didn't have a B in ELK, and then we came up with this. And then people were very focused on this, like, oh, you're a search company, you're doing full text search, and now you're doing logs. But this is not the entire story. And kind of the story that I want to tell about today is that it's more about analytics as well, for example, which is a big use case for us. So you end up with a stack like this. But today, really, I will just focus on Elasticsearch, where we store the data, and then mostly Kibana to visualize what is going on in there. So let's take a look at some of the options that you have. So first off, you need to run that. We have already discussed cloud in the chat shortly. So for example, I'm running this on, I think I have updated since I took that screenshot, but I have 2 Elasticsearch instances, a machine learning node and a Kibana node here running. They're not 7.3 anymore, but the latest 7.6.2. But this is what I have running on cloud. If you don't want to use a cloud service or we don't have a cloud in your region yet, many ways to run your software, but you could, for example, run everything on Docker. So the minimal example to reproduce this with Docker containers would be this Docker Compose file. You just need to pop in the right version number in Elastic version, and then you can bring up this 1 Elasticsearch node, 1 Kibana node, and then you can run everything. And the goal here is really to show you how to get started with playing around yourself. So this is more intro level, but you can then make it more complicated as you go along. So what I want to use is the e-commerce orders sample data set. If you head over to Kibana, if you've never seen it, this is Kibana, but you probably have. On the splash screen that opens, you can here see the add sample data. And if you click on that, you can import multiple data sets. So for example, here you can see I have already imported our e-commerce data set, but we also have some flights and some weblogs. So for multiple use cases, we have different data types. And they will bring data and it will be generated for the current time. So it will be around 3 or 4 weeks around now. And that will also bring dashboards and some pre-built visualizations you can use to learn. And we will dive a bit into that data set. So this is a regular data set about e-commerce. So you have people buying stuff, basically. Let's keep it simple. The first place where you normally end up to look at your data is Discover. And you can see here, I have already picked the right time frame. So the past 16 days and 18 days into the future, this is the data that we have collected, and we have like 4,600 transactions or so, and you could open one up here. This is one specific data set. You could then filter on, I don't know, just everybody with the last name Jensen, and you could only show that, or people with that last name, or exclude people with that last name with those magnifying glasses. We could toggle those columns so we just see the last names. For example, when I do that and now unfold that, you just see the last names of people. Obviously, you could just do full text search here and it will autocomplete on any single field. So we could just search for a specific first name. So we could just do that here, customer first name equals, and then it will give you either some options or you can just start typing the first name that you're looking for. And this is how you can slice and dice your data, but this doesn't give you too much in terms of visualizations yet. So we want to dive a bit more into visualizations. And before we go into that, I wanted to quickly touch on one other topic that is very related. So we've seen this one. There are 2 ways to structure data in Elasticsearch in general. There is the entity-centric, and then there is the time-centric or time series approach. What we have seen in Discover so far is very much the time series approach. So you can see for specific days how many shopping events we had on each of those days. But the other approach might be that you're more interested in like the aggregated view on one specific entity. And one entity could, for example, be the customer. So rather than having like each individual transaction, you would want to have one entity for one customer and then aggregate all of their data together. And we can actually do that on the fly based on the data that we have imported here. So with the entity-centric view, we can transform into that from the individual transactions that we had. So to give you an idea what that looks like, here on that little management wheelie icon, you have transforms here, and transforms are a bit like a background job that you can run in the background, and they will just continuously aggregate your entities into the way you want to view them. So I pick an index pattern. By the way, the index pattern that is being generated by the Kibana sample data here is called Kibana sample data e-commerce, which is very long and I never remember, but we'll get back to that. So right now here on the right-hand side, you can see these are the individual documents that you had so far. We could unfold them, but you could see each one is just one transaction. Now, this is a time series approach. How do we get to that entity-centric approach? So we need to group on something. For example, we could just say, we want to take the full name. So simplified, we assume the full name is unique. Normally you would probably use a login or an email address or whatever, but we'll keep it simple and just aggregate on that full name. This is what we aggregate on or group by, and then we run various aggregations on those pieces of data. So for example, we could then aggregate the sum of the product price. So I'm not interested in the base price, but product price is probably a good field. So for example, I want to see how much did each person spend in my shop. And now you can see down here in that pivot table, you can see the group by clause and what everybody spent. Also, I want, for example, to have how many items did they buy, and that was a count on the transactions or whatever that field was called. You cannot order ID. That might make sense. So you can see how many orders were done here by one person. And then you can just create this. You can give this a name like customer name that we want to transform this on, and then say we want to call this sample customer. We create the index pattern, and then we will create on the fly this structure. Also, we can do this continuously. So based on the order date, every time a new order comes in, we update every customer based on that every 60 seconds. And that will create that entity-centric view. And then you can just run this in the background. And for some ways to visualize your data, this will be much easier to work with than that each individual transaction approach. It's just to show you the two modeling approaches that you can use with data. And this will create my new index in the background. We can then jump into that. So I have called it customer sample customer. And for example, we could do a quick search on that. What did I call it? Customer sample customer. Luckily, this knows what I want. And you can see this is what is being generated in Elasticsearch now for me. So we have, for example, the name, how many transactions they had, and what they spent with the shop. And this is just a subset or a pivot of that data. So that can be handy in some cases, but not in all. But before we spend too much time on this one, let's keep on with some visualizations. So if you haven't played with Kibana recently, we added something called lens. This will make slicing and dicing your data a lot easier than it used to be. So here, it picked the wrong index because that is my default index, and I want to switch to that sample data that we had. It has the right time frame, and now it shows me these are all the fields that are filled in this index, and you can just drop that into that area here to get a quick visualization of what is happening. So for example, I could just drop the records and you could see how many records did we have over time here. You can also just pick the visualization. If you've used Kibana before, you always had to know upfront what you want. With Lens, this is not really the case anymore. With Lens, you can explore your data in a much easier fashion because it shows you A, what data is available and what you can use here, and B, what is your preferred visualization. So you could just switch out the visualization type on the fly, or you just want to have the metric, like these are how many records we had. All of this you could just do on the fly. You could also, for example, say the price, and since everything is based on search, we can just search. We could just see the product price over time. And if I switch back to the visualization for that, over time, this is how the average product's price developed over time. And you could just click together, okay, I'm interested in the sum, for example, rather than the average. And this is how you can very easily slice and dice your data into different pieces that you might want to have. Sometimes you still want to make it a bit more complicated, then you would still need to pick a custom visualization. So for example, here, let's do a line chart. In the line chart, what I want to do is, let's pick the right index pattern again. So here you see I need to upfront pick which type of visualization, which index pattern, but now I can slice and dice that data. So for the buckets, for the x-axis, for example, I want to have a date histogram. Again, in our time frame, you can just see like how many items were bought every day, how many transactions did we have. But we could make this more interesting. Right now, it's just the count of the documents for each day, which are basically the transactions. We could also say, I want to add a second metric here. And the metric that I want to aggregate is the sum. And the sum, again, maybe I'm interested in the price. So let's say product's price. Then you can visualize that, and then you will see both the count of how many items were sold per day. And you could say like, this is called items, and this field is called price. And then you can show them together. What is not ideal here, by the way, is because one has like the axes don't really make sense for both of them. You could just say like, I want to break that up into a new axis, run this here, and then you can see a much better comparison where they overlap. And you can see how sometimes the number of sold items and the price correlate, and sometimes they kind of like fall a bit apart. And this might already be interesting for your use case to see like, where's the correlation, where are outliers? So this is one way you could visualize the data. Another thing that might come in handy is something that lots of people want to have are like tag clouds. We do support tag clouds as well. So here, again, we need to pick the index pattern up front. I pick my Kibana sample data. And right now, we just see everything together. What do I need to do? I need to bucket those again. So here, I want to bucket that in a terms aggregation based on the full name. So we have the customer full name, and let's say I want to have the 15 customers, which let's say spent the most money with us. Right now, this is not correct, by the way, because this is just based on the count. So this is based on how many times did they buy something. To change that here, rather than just having a count of the documents, we would again need to switch this for a sum on the price field. So product price, let's say, is the right one. And when I run that, you could see that we have one outlier. For example, this person here spent way more money with us than all the others, which was something that you didn't really see before. So depending on the type of visualization, you might find interesting new pieces of data. By the way, if you want to use any of that data later on in the dashboard, all you need to do is you can save it here, give it a nice name, and then you store it under whatever name you find for that. Timing wise, I think I will have like 5 more minutes or so, and then I'll I'll hand back over. Let's do some more visualizations since we're in the flow. So what you can do is, if you have something that is a time series data, we have something with a very complicated name called time series visual builder, but that's why we abbreviate it with this, or just call it visual builder. It basically allows you to build a time series, aggregating multiple fields together and showing you what is happening here. This piece of data here looks totally wrong. Has anybody used Visual Builder before and knows what is the problem here? Because this will be something that you will run into when you try to use this. So by default, this uses the default index name or index pattern that you have defined, which was FileBeat. And this was when I ran this and collected some log files. So this is the wrong index. Luckily, since I can never remember how that field is properly called, I have the index management open here where I can see what they're called, and I can just copy out the name of my index. So here you see all the indices in my system, and I've copied the right one. So I want to use this index name, and I want to order that by customer date. Okay, now this looks much better again. So here you can see what we have collected over time. Again, rather than having the count of documents, we could just say, for example, I want to have the sum again, and you can see this supports a lot of different visualizations. So you could get the minimum, the maximum, a filter ratio, a percentile. You could run aggregations based on the field that you have. So these are all things that you can do. Let me just pick the product's price again. And then you can see this is how the sum of the product price developed over time. What is not so great right now is currently on the description, it's just some value and you don't really know what it is. If you click on these options here, for example, you can say, what is this kind of value? So right now we just have the value, but I might say I'm interested in the dollar value of this. So we could just change this here to dollar. By the way, if you have something like bytes or durations, this will be picked up automatically and show you good values as well if you have those. And now you can actually see what is the average spend per day, and you can visualize that much nicer. Another thing that can come in handy is that you might want to annotate this data. So let's say we have a spring sale, and I have added a document here. This is my spring sale. So my spring sale started on the 9th of April. And this is the document I added. And it's called, the index is called events, and then we have a field description. So what I want to add here is, you have here annotations, and I can add an annotation here. The index that where we added this was called events. And I think it was description, that was the field that we had, description. And then you could say like new event, and then you have this curly brace syntax, description, where you can annotate this. And if I didn't mistype, it should annotate it, hopefully. Where is it?
Yeah, the time field is missing, apparently.
Ah, yeah, wait. I have the times. That's the 9th of April. Event was the right index. I don't think I need this field, to be honest.
No, but I mean in the time field, just close to the index.
Ah, yeah, that is true. This one here is the one that is missing. Thank you. And now you can see here was our spring sale. And whenever you have a sale, and this is a lucky coincidence that right afterwards our event spiked, you can see your spring sale here actually kicked off some sales spike. And you could annotate that. Obviously, this makes also sense for any machine data like logs or so. You deploy a new version of your software, you want to annotate it. But also for any analytics and business data, the same thing applies. Since we're running a bit short on time, let me show you some other pieces just on the slides. So if you want to combine everything here, this is what a dashboard could look like. I'm just storing the different visualizations that I have. For example, this was the average price per item, items per day and price per day, and that tag cloud, you could visualize that together. What you could also do is you could export those as a picture or a PDF, or if it's a table or list, you could also export this as a CSV file. And then you can just download those and use them somewhere else. We also have pretty good map support by now. So here, for example, you see in which countries or regions did you have revenue and how much. And you could, for example, see based on the intensity of the green color, how many sales events did you have in each color and how you were doing there. For example, Saudi Arabia down there has been pretty successful. And unfortunately for today, I've cut off South Africa here, but I'm not sure we tracked sales for South Africa. Final thing is Canvas, where you can visualize things in a pixel perfect way. So you can just take your data and just draw it out any way you want. Here, this is one of the pre-built Canvas dashboards. So if you import the data, head to Canvas, you just have those and you can explore how they are built to build your own. The main idea here is, especially if you have like some sales report that you do every month, rather than copying out the data from Kibana or taking a screenshot from Kibana and putting that in your slide deck, you could just do the presentation right away from Kibana. So this is easy to do here. And with that, I think that was pretty much it. Oh yeah, we have anomaly detection. If you have, for example, a sales anomaly, you might get an alert for that. Though, yeah, here's you see high total sales when we had more sales on one day than we were expecting. This is when I ran this through our anomaly detection, and you might get an alert because maybe some fraud is happening, or you're just having a spring sale and that one is going very well. So to wrap up, Kibana and Elasticsearch are more than full text search and logs nowadays. Like we have this full analytics use case in there as well. So don't be limited in your imagination with that part. For the modeling, either time series or entity-centric can make sense depending on your use case and what you'd want to draw out. Though for most of the things that I've shown you here right now, those were still from the time series-based approach. And you have various visualizations to go out with that. If you want to get the slides, I have them online as well on my website.